$30 billion over 30 years. That's $1 billion a year. That's real money. And that's how much Ontario taxpayers could be paying to expand Toronto's transit system across the city. Its proponents don't seem too unhappy about that. One poll showing 80% support among Torontonians. But Mayor Ford says no to the plan dubbed One City. Karen Stentz, chair of the Toronto Transit Commission, says she's ready to move forward with or without support from the province, with or without support from the mayor, apparently. Yes, even Dalton McGuinty, the premier, his government is skeptical. That's how you know what kind of attitude is at work here.
Screw you, taxpayer!
All right, let's turn to Adrienne Batra, comment editor at the Toronto Sun. Adrienne, first of all, let's deal with the fact, according to the poll, that 4 out of 5 Torontonians are all for this, regardless of the expense. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that Torontonians want more transit. They want to see more subways. They want to see more connecting of the city. Right now, we've got this sort of, well, you remember Toronto, Charles, the subway system is a bit disjointed. Some lines begin and end in very odd spots. So I think that the poll numbers, although show a high level of support, I think when it comes down to the dimes and nickels of it, in the long run, I don't think Toronto taxpayers are going to be too happy about it. Here's the challenge, though. One, of course, depends on how the question was asked. But also, we in Toronto are looking at, in terms of One City, this plan that was proposed at $30 billion over 30 years. They're looking at a regional model where Toronto taxpayers, Ontario taxpayers, and eventually Canadian taxpayers are going to have to pay for Toronto's transit system. That's not going to work. That's not going to fly with the federal government. The provincial government has already said no. And you may recall, because you and I have talked about this before, there was a big transit fight in the city of Toronto just a few short months ago, once again led by Karen Stentz. Rob Ford's hand-picked chair of the TTC led a revolt against him to build a subway line out in Scarborough. So this plan is calling for a tax increase of $180 a year on average for 30 years, but we know tax increases never end. There's never a sunset clause. So what she'd like the provincial government to do is change some of the rules. The province has said no. Council will vote on this next week, whether or not they want to see a report come forward. That will probably go through. We'll see what happens in October. But it's interesting to hear from some of the insiders at City Hall right now. There doesn't seem to be a lot of support in general for this plan. So even the left wing of council might not support this.
Okay, but if it does go through, it will mean that taxes will go up in Toronto.
That's right.
Taxes will go up in Ontario. And as far as the rest of the country is concerned, since Ontario is now a have-not and will be a have-not for as far as the eye can see, provinces in the rest of the country that are in surplus or doing better, shall we say, will also be part of this, whether they're enjoying the subway or not. They'll also be shoveling money into Ontario. It's a cross-country thing.
Of course, and the federal government is nearly loath to put too much focus on the city of Toronto or even the province of Ontario because they know that the resources are coming from other parts of the country. So there would be a lot of fights around the federal cabinet table if this were to go through, but it likely won't since the provincial government has already poured cold water on it. They need the province to change some legislative rules in order for the city to levy this fee. But in spite of that, the TTC chair and some of those that are supporting her deputy chair on the TTC, Glenn de Bearmaker, who actually is a Scarborough councillor and voted against having a subway in Scarborough. This is a way for him to save a bit of face for the next municipal election in 2014. So there isn't a lot of support from other levels of government. But not only that, Charles, they didn't even talk to the other levels of government. They didn't even speak to Metrolinx, who is the province's regional transportation arm. They didn't have conversations with them to suggest that this new plan is going to come forward. The provincial government has already watched the shenanigans that have gone on at City Hall. They've seen the childish behavior that's come out of there. They don't want to go through another fight. They don't want to split their cabinet. They don't want to split their caucus for those that support this and those that don't. That's not a fight that McGuinty can afford to have.
All right, Adrienne, as you know, because you used to do Canadian Taxpayers Federation stuff based in Winnipeg, forever in Winnipeg, and a day they've been talking about a rapid transit system. Supposedly one is going in. When you look at the schematics, it's awfully puny compared to what any real city has. I mean, it's a rapid transit system. I think it consists of a mule, a boy, and a whip. Okay, here's the question. Should Winnipeggers, after looking at what is going on right now in Toronto, have an expectation that someday their mayor and maybe the province's premier will someday try to ask the rest of Canada to subsidize a real rapid transit system for Winnipeg? Is that where this could go? It's
entirely possible. You and I mean, I haven't been in Winnipeg in a long time, but as far as I can recall, rapid transit in Winnipeg is still a car. But in spite of that, there is always going to be someone that looks at what Toronto is doing, for better or worse, bag bans, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to look at, they could potentially use that as a model in their own jurisdiction. But to be sure, when other jurisdictions are looking at what Toronto has done or is going to do, they need to look at one thing, and that's the St. Clair streetcar right-of-way. That was a disaster. It was millions of dollars overrun, cost overrun. Businesses went under, and it affected motorists. And to this day, we still have challenges with the St. Clair right-of-way. So I certainly wouldn't want to see other cities in this country use that as a model when they're looking at Toronto.
See, my takeaway from this, it doesn't matter that it's happening in Toronto. That's just where it's happening right now, and it's instructive. But the takeaway for me as a Canadian is that, the spirit of the times, regardless of what's going on all over the world, regardless of the need to tighten belts, austerity, what have you, some politicians and some political agencies still see it as useful to spend money when there is no money, and they can always find a poll saying, hey, the public wants it.
Of course, you're going to get a poll to say whatever you want, Charles. I mean, it's really challenging right now because we do face a transit issue in the city. And other cities have that issue as well. But as far as paying for it, they never did come up with a long-term plan. One of the biggest challenges we have right now is that Toronto's does not have a world-class transit model. That would have happened years ago if someone in council and the provincial government was focused on that. That would have happened way before Rob Ford came along, for example. But they don't look at the long-term costs for capital and how to maintain the infrastructure and maintain the costs that it requires to keep the tracks going, to keep the subways going, to keep the streetcars going. That's where a one city plan, for example, fails miserably.
Adrienne, thank you as always for the visit.
My pleasure.